All right, so far in this playlist, what we've been doing is we've been using the API no auth Python file. And essentially what that allows you to do is you can do all these data calls without passing in any request key. So I'll just open up the documentation one more time. So we've been doing API no auth where we just simply do the data call and we do the pagination like so. So we've done the nav table with these two data calls, and for both the data calls, we've done the pagination portion. So now what we want to do, we want to move up to the authenticated API, which is api.py. So how do we get the request key? So first you have to mention the office ID and the app ID in the auth call. So the auth call will return the request key if you mention office ID as 123456 and the app ID as 654321. I've coded it to be such. In production, you'll have much more complicated numbers. So once you execute this get call, you are going to get a request key. Once you get this request key, you have to put this request key as part of request headers in your get call for boys and get call for girls. So this is the get call for boys, and then this request key will be in your request headers. So that's the documentation, and we need to build our API as per that documentation. So that's our goal for this video. All right, so we're going to open up Power BI and create it in mQuery first, and then we'll move on to the SDK. All right, so first things first, we would need to enable our api.py rather than using API no auth, because that other Python file is the one that has the authentication layer. So if you have been installing Fast API and if you've been following along with me, then you can do this step, but it's optional. So if you've been running your API on command prompt, then open up your command prompt session. Or if you're doing it like me, where you've split terminal session, you can do that. So this is your API screen right here. You want to hit Control and C to stop the session. And now it's saying it aborted. So now you want to start uvicorn API app host localhost, which is your local machine, and then port 80. And if you get an error message here, just make sure that you do have the api.py file on your directory. So if you go this PC, C drive users, and your name, you should have this api.py file in there. Otherwise, this won't work. Anyway, so now that we have the API running, I'm just going to open up Postman and then we can see how this new API works in practice. So it'll take a couple of seconds to open. All right, so we got Postman open here. So I'm going to do localhost port 80 and boys, and then this should just bring in the first page. However, if I hit send, it says invalid request key. So I'm no longer being able to bring in the data without authorization. So first of all, I need to return my request key as per the documentation. So I do auth. And I already have this set up here previously where I mentioned the office ID as 123456 and the app ID as 654321. So it's only this combination that will work. Let's say hypothetically you give the wrong input and you hit send, it's going to say unauthorized invalid office ID or app ID. So you have to give the right numbers and then you get this request key. So what you want Power Query to do, and the SDK as well, is you want to do this call. You want to get this request key, and then you want to bring this request key onto the actual data call. So now I'm going to do my actual data call. So I'm going to do localhost 80 boys. And in my headers, I'm going to do request key. And then this is the request key that I just got. And I'm going to hit send. And now you can see my API is working again after I pass on this request key in the request headers. So this is the goal that we need to do. So let's build this in Power Query first, then the SDK next, and then we'll see how it works. So to start off with, let's actually take this request key and hit copy. So it's on our clipboard right now. You want to open up Power BI. And in mQuery, you can manually write down your request header syntax. Or if you don't know how to write the syntax, what you can do is you can go to web source, advanced. Your URL is localhost 80 boys, and you can put in your request key here under request headers, and then hit OK. And then eventually that query will show up. There we go. And this is the syntax. So after the hyperlink is just headers, and then this thing over here. So you can take that piece, go back to your query one, and paste it here. Get rid of these parentheses and hit done. Okay, so now if I refresh this, I can sort of see that it's actually using the request key to pull in the data. If I did not have the request key, it wouldn't have worked. So perfect. So our static request key is working here right now. So let's take this piece of code and you want to put it on the SDK as well. So take this. I'm on my SDK right now, and I'm going to paste this here. Get rid of the additional parentheses. This I did for the boys table, then I want to go down to the girls table function and do the same thing. So now I'm going to test this out, Control-Shift-B. Set my credential. And evaluate the current file. So I'm getting these two tables, right? But the point of using the SDK is so that the request key is dynamic. So I don't have to like write it down here. Rather, I want it to be like an input parameter like I did for URL. So that's what I want to do moving forward. So how do I get that done? So this shared connector.contents where you're passing in URL as text, you would want to add in key as text here. So now it's asking for two inputs. So the next thing you need to do is you need to involve this input into your nav table as well. And for your both boys and girls function, you would need key as text as well, because on both of these queries for the boys table and the girls table, you are going to be using key as a way to reference the request key within the mQuery. And over here for your trip and nav table, you're passing two variables, two parameters, URL and key. So you change all that. For your boys table, you have URL as text and you're calling URL here. Then you want to do key as text and you would be calling key here. So instead of this big number, I'm going to call this key. Same thing with the girls function. I'm going to be passing in two parameters. And I'm going to call this long thing key. And I think we should be good to go there. So let's go ahead and before we build this, I have my local host here. So my connector test.contents, if you come back here for connector test.contents, I'm passing in two parameters, URL first and then key second. So I'm already passing in my URL here. I want to pass in my key over here. Oops. So just pass in the key. All right. So now that we got that out of the way, let's build this. Everything looks good. Set credential, connector test. All good. Evaluate current file. All right. We got boys table and girls table. Let us take this mess file that we just made and see whether it works. Power BI, custom connectors, replace. All right, so get rid of this query. Create a new query. Connector test. Sorry about that. URL is http localhost port 80, and my key is, let's just copy the key from Visual Studio Code. This thing right, or rather for Postman, copy that and paste it here. Connect. And there we go, your boys table and your girls table using the authentication. Huh. This is actually something wrong in the way I coded the API, where it shows you too many. If you see that, don't worry about that. That's basically something wrong in my Python code. I'm probably going to update that on my GitHub, but yeah, don't ignore that issue if you see it again. So that is basically how you do static request keys. We're almost to the end where we're going to talk about dynamic request keys. So stay tuned for that.